I've got a dear friend, Sebastian Gorka, Dr. Gorka, joining us here from Washington, D.C. For those of you who don't know Dr. Gorka, well, first of all, we've been friends for what, 20 years, maybe a couple
At
of
least,
decades, a
at least.
long, long time.
Yeah.
Um, he is a syndicated radio talk show host with Salem Radio. If you really want to know what's going on in our country and foreign policy, I highly recommend that you join his daily talk show. It's fantastic. He's also a published author. He's written three amazing books: Defeating Jihad, Why We Fight, and The War for America's Soul. He's a dear friend, a brother. We've both lectured on the DC circuit, and we've lectured everywhere from OSD, the Office of Secretary of Defense, to Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. We've been in numerous, talking circuits together, and we've kept in touch over the years, and we often discuss some of these complex issues. And for us at the Blessing Projects, we've been helping a lot of persecuted Christians across the Middle East, and then now with the war between Hamas and Israel, and hopefully the war won't start with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but that's another point we'll touch on. It's gotten very complicated, so we decided to bring my brother, Dr. Gorka, on so we can answer some of these complex questions on what's going on in the Middle East. And this will kind of paint a broad brush on why we do what we do at the Blessing Projects, because a lot of people are hurting, especially Christians, persecuted Christians, and now Israelis. So Seb, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Um, why don't we just dive right in, because there are a lot of questions. I get a lot of calls from friends and from family members. Many don't really understand how we're so divided in the United States on the issue between Israel and Hamas. On one hand, you see polls where the bulk of Americans support Israel. But then you look at college campuses, and these young people are, chanting things from the river to the sea, for example. They're so pro-Palestinian, yet when you pulse them to actually find out what they really know about this situation, they're often ignorant, very, very ignorant. So what is your perspective from the people you talk to on what's going on really on this topic?
Well, first things first, Rudy, I just want to recognize you, your wife, Terry, everybody at the Blessings Project, and all the incredible work you've done to literally save Christians and our allies and partners across the world. There is one religion that is more persecuted than any other, and that is the religion of Jesus Christ. So God bless you,
Man,
Rudy. It's
thank
an
you.
honor to know you and to support you in however I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we could spend hours on why things are the way they are, especially domestically in America and the West. It is horrific. If you see just yesterday, you see Claudette Gay, the president of Harvard University, in front of Congress, incapable of denouncing genocidal calls against Israel. She's
Mhm.
asked, is the river to the sea a genocidal statement? And she said yes. And then she's asked by Congresswoman Stefanik, what is Harvard doing about that being chanted on your campus? And she is incapable of saying it is wrong, and Harvard denounces it and action will be taken. How did we get here? Read chapter 3 of my third book, The War for America's Soul. Full disclosure, as a conservative whose father was a Catholic imprisoned in communist Hungary at the age of 20, who was liberated from a political prison after 6 years, we have to understand that we may have won the Cold War thanks to Reagan, to St. John Paul II, to Margaret Thatcher, but the communism that was defeated in the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact metastasized through something called the Long March Through the Institutions. If you look at the fact, and this is all, if you doubt anything I say, please don't take my word for it, look it up yourself. 93% of all faculty donations in America from colleges go to the Democrat Party. So they have a lock on education. They had a lock on the media until recently with Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. If you look at what's coming out of Hollywood, what's coming out of the mainstream media, the fact that the BBC, for example, refuses to call Hamas a terrorist organization, the fact that we have, yesterday, 103 Democrat congressmen and women refused to denounce anti-Semitism. I mean,
unbelievable.
It's stunning. I mean, it's truly shocking. How did we get here? Well, to be brutally honest, because the people who believed in America, believed in the West, understand that the greatest nation created by God is Israel, the greatest nation created by man is America. We kind of surrendered the culture. There's a very famous, well, not famous enough. If you understand the evolution of communism, you know who he is. There was a crippled communist called Antonio Gramsci, who, as he was sitting in a prison cell in Mussolini's fascist Italy, came to a realization. He said, why did communism only work in feudal agrarian countries like Tsarist Russia? Why does it fail where there are strong Christian middle-class nations like America, like the UK? Why did it fail? Well, he said, because if you have faith, if you believe in the nuclear family, if you are a stable part of the middle class, then when somebody says, man the barricades, we need a revolution, take control of the means of production, the middle class say, what are you talking about? I'm very happy. I've got my little business. I've got my job. My kids go to a new school. Revolutionary fervor only succeeds where you have large peasant classes like Tsarist Russia in 1917 or China in 1948. So what if you're a communist, if you're a man of the left, if you're a revolutionary, what do you have to do? And Antonio Gramsci came up with the idea that you don't go up against the system. You don't try and take over stable Judeo-Christian nations. You take over the institutions from the inside. This is what a later Marxist called Rudy named the Long March Through the Institutions. You inveigle yourselves into the media. You take over Hollywood. You take over the teacher training colleges. And then you wake up one morning and 93% of faculty in America donate to the left. So it's really the responsibility, the culpability of patriots that we didn't take culture seriously. As the late, great Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. By the time any issue arrives here in Washington, D.C., doesn't matter what the issue is, immigration, the Second Amendment, education, doesn't matter. By the time it arrives to Congress, it has long been settled in the culture, in Hollywood, in the high schools, in the universities. It is done and dusted, and it's just a matter of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. The culture is where politics is formed and shaped. And to be more concrete as to how we get here, that we have people breaching the security of the White House after October the 7th, daubing red paint on the White House fence.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens. How did we get here? Well, because Marxism of the Maoist Leninist type transmogrified over the last 40 years to critical theory, critical race theory, critical law theory, critical gender theory. And in a nutshell, it's really, this sounds obtuse, it sounds too oversimplified, but really, if you look at the materials that are taught, the following is the case. The West is built on oppression. Everywhere else is oppressed. If you are brown, if you are black, you are always a victim. If you are white, you are always the oppressor. And in a strange twist of fate, since the reestablishment of Israel in 1948, Israel which was almost wiped off the face of the earth as a religion, as an ethnicity by Hitler. Now, this incredibly successful microstate of 9 million people is now deemed by the left to be the oppressor. So surrounded by 280 million Arabs who
Or
don't
more.
want
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people of Gaza, who build walls between Egypt and Gaza, this tiny microstate is somehow the oppressor, 9 million Jews, is the oppressor of 280 million Arabs. It is bizarre, it is perverse, but that is the narrative that these young people have fallen for.
No, absolutely. You're spot on. Now, before I ask you the next question, which is really going to focus on how is U.S. policy basically further inflaming the problems currently in the Middle East. I mean, you touched on some very, very key points here. Dennis Prager had a series of questions when he addressed, I think it was Oxford University. He said the question is like, if you ask Lebanese, who is more dangerous to Lebanon? Is it Hezbollah and Iran, or is it Israel? And the answer is Hezbollah and Iran. If you ask Egypt, who's more dangerous to them? Is it Israel or is it the Muslim Brotherhood? It's the Muslim Brotherhood. So essentially, Israel has been a good neighbor to all the Arabs around it. It's never attacked unless provoked. But yet the kids don't see that. Now our US policy is failing even more and exacerbating these problems and essentially making this war longer. And the longer this war goes, the further these young people, these college institutions, these lefties get more entrenched and more disinformation is pushed out. But from your viewpoint, how has this administration really exacerbated the current problems? Because we've been attacked, over 75 plus times in the region, whether it was in Syria or the Red Sea or whatnot. We've done absolutely nothing about it. And now we're pushing for peace and ceasefire. Meanwhile, we're basically slowing down the momentum of Israel, and we're just causing all kinds of other issues and problems down the road. How do you see this unfolding?
Well, look, people, again, full disclosure, people need to know that I was deputy assistant to the president for strategy in the Trump administration. So,
Right.
that is my view. And when we came into the White House, we radically changed America's stance in the world. And I'd spent 2.5 years teaching the Marines at Quantico, and I borrowed a phrase from them when I was asked on television as deputy assistant to the president. So what's changed? What is the Trump vision of America for the world? And I said, it's very easy. I borrowed the Marine Corps phrase, no better friend, no worse enemy. And if you look at what we did, crushing ISIS in a matter of months, the physical caliphate, creating the most radical, most successful peace accords, the Abraham Accords, the region had ever seen since 1948, whether it's taking on China, Little Kim. The proudest moment of my career is when I walked into the Oval Office and I was asked by the president and my boss, Stephen Bannon, to brief the whole cabinet as to why we have to withdraw from the Obama-Iran deal, the JCPOA-Iran deal, and why funding the world's biggest sponsor of state terrorism is a bad thing. And President Trump, after we gave our briefing, pulled the plug on the Iran deal. That's, we were very clear. We're not interventionists. We're not neoconservatives. We don't believe you can turn Afghanistan, Iraq, or any other country into a democracy at the end of a gun barrel. But when force is needed, when you cross a line, we will use it. When this is all declassified now, when we briefed the president that the murderous regime of Bashar al-Assad is about to use chemical weapons for a second time against civilians, President Trump said, okay, flatten that airbase that is preparing the chemical weapons. And he launched 52 cruise missiles and turned that Syrian airbase into a sheet of glass. Likewise, when we heard that Russian troops are running around the Middle East, destabilizing that area. It's the Wagner group, but they're working for Vladimir Putin. When we told the president there's 300 Russians destabilizing the Middle East, what did he do? He said, kill them all. And in the
Yeah.
space of 4 hours, no president since the October Revolution of 1917, not even the great Ronald Reagan, has killed 300 Russians in one day, except for my boss, because you crossed the line. And then the most important of all you need to understand with regards to the president is what we did with Israel, not just the Abraham Accords. 23 years before we came into the office, to the White House, Bill Clinton promised to recognize Jerusalem and move the embassy. Every 6 months since that promise was made, the incumbent president, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, broke that promise. They told Israel, sorry, I know we said we're going to do this, but it's not good right now, and we're not going to do it. For 23 years, America broke her promise. President Trump said, we're going to do it. With only the support of 3 members of his cabinet, even so-called warrior legends like Mad Dog Mattis wet themselves and said, Mr. President, we can't do this. You'll trigger World War III. I don't have enough Marines to protect our embassies. And what did President Trump say? This was at a NSC meeting at principals level. He said, well, Jim, we're going to do it for 3 reasons. Number 1, we promised the Israeli people more than 2 decades ago. Number 2, I promised the American people when I was on the campaign trail. Oh, and by the way, Jim, it's the right thing to do. We recognized Jerusalem. We moved the embassy. There was no World War III. Very simply put, bad guys were afraid of us. After we killed 300 Russians in Syria, what did Vladimir Putin do? The guy that we were supposed to be colluding with, he didn't even hold a press conference. He was so afraid of us. When President Trump told Kim in North Korea, hey, buddy, my button's bigger than yours. You mess around with those missiles and we'll turn Pyongyang into a scene from a horror movie. It worked. We got him to a peace meeting in Singapore. The bad guys were afraid of us. And the good guys, whether it's the UK, whether it's Israel, they felt reassured. What happens now? Look, let's be brutally honest. The Biden administration is Obama 3.0. These are people, there's no big conspiracy. You don't have to look at some kind of puppet master, but these are all men of the left who acquiesce to the radicals, like the Squad, to the anti-Semites, or beyond that. Look, remember, what did Obama say on the campaign trail? He said something quite shocking that people forget. He said, we are going to radically transform America. Fundamentally, he said, fundamentally transform. Now, Rudy, if you love something, do you wish to fundamentally transform it? I'm sure if you told Terry, I love you, but I want to fundamentally transform you, I think you'd be sleeping outside, okay?
For sure, 100%.
So these are people who may not actively be colluding with our enemies, except in some cases they are. If you look at Mark Milley and the People's Liberation Army in China and so forth. But even if they're not actively colluding with our enemies, they think America is the problem. I mean, go back. I mean, remember my first book, Defeating Jihad? This is the one that got me into the White House. Back then, I wrote this book for one simple reason. When I was working in the Obama Defense Department, we had this political overlay to counterterrorism analysis where we were the problem. It wasn't jihadi ideology. It was poverty, neocolonialism, lack of education, America enforcing its writ over the world, the West being, neocolonialist. These people think we are the problem. If you think we are the problem, I mean, let me just illustrate this with one thing. Again, not me talking. The most senior military officer in the world, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of the superpower that is America, is in uniform. He's busting out of his uniform because he's so overweight. And Mark Milley is testifying in front of Congress about why is West Point teaching critical race theory? Critical race theory, which, by the way, says if you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're colored, you're a victim. That is the essence of critical race theory. And what does this man in uniform, this chief top man in the US military say? He said, well, I don't know what critical race theory is, but I'm glad it's being taught at West Point because I'm white and I want to understand white rage. There's your answer. There's this self-hatred. And to go to the geopolitics of it all, if Iran if the mullahs, if the IRGC, if Hezbollah, if Hamas, if Putin, if Kim see an American political leadership that doesn't love America, what are you going to do? The red team answer is very simple. You're going to make hay while the sun shines. It is the easiest thing to defeat an enemy who doesn't believe in themselves. Remember what Clausewitz taught us. The essence of war is will. Why does he use all these analogies of wrestlers vying with each other, card players at a card table? It is the will to win. Why in Vietnam was the VC? The VC didn't have A-10s, the VC didn't have B-1 bombers, but they had the will to fight us. And when Cronkite every night is telling America, we're losing, we're losing, we're losing, America believes we're losing. Of course we weren't losing, but we believe we're losing, and therefore Saigon 72, Paris Accords, and so forth. So at the end of the day, you don't have to look for anything more complicated than we are driven by people who don't believe in America. And when that happens, the world is unstable. Again, evidence, empirical, not my opinion.
Yep.
When the Biden administration came in, we had the first Sino-American summit in Anchorage. The chief diplomat for communist China, the biggest communist nation in the world, is sitting across the table from our chief diplomat, Antony Blinken. And what happens to Blinken? Watch the video. It tells you everything you need to know about why there's war in Ukraine, why we surrendered Afghanistan, why we have the biggest death of Jews since the Shoah, since the Holocaust. The chief Chinese diplomat stands up and says, you are not in a position to lecture us given the injustice and the lack of social equality in America. He's literally using BLM talking points to the American chief diplomat. And what does Antony Blinken do? He sits there like a scolded little boy and he takes it. Could you imagine if they'd done that to Mike Pompeo, to me, or Donald Trump? There would have been hell to pay. But
Absolutely.
these people actually agree. They agree with the assessment. Oh, yes, there's no social justice. I'm white and I'm bad. This is why we are where we are today. When America isn't led by those who believe in America, you have genocide.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And that's what we're seeing across the Middle East is the problems are getting more and more, they're exacerbated more and more. I mean, look at Armenia right now. Most people, I know Blinken at one point pointed towards Armenia, but then it disappeared off the news. They're on the brink of war. I mean, we've helped a lot of Christians up there, persecuted Christians. The Azerbaijanis are pushing with the help of Turkey with advanced weaponry against these people and slaughtering them left and right. Old churches, old monasteries are being taken over and converted to mosques. It's a big problem, but nobody's talking about it. This is what happens based on your points is when we are absent from the stage and when we are following a policy of appeasement, this is what we get is it's a continuous I guess one thing feeds off of another and you have regional dysfunction. I'm sure you've seen that, and I'm sure you've taken you've seen what's going on in Armenia right now.
No, absolutely. So this is a tragedy that people don't follow. I mean, Armenia, the Nagorno-Karabakh, that's literally on Europe's doorstep. And it's as if it didn't happen. It's been forgotten. We're talking about ancient Christian civilization that goes up against, the caviar diplomacy of the Azeris, the Turkic influence support militarily of, look, you know better than I do, but it's really a Christian genocide, Rudy, isn't it?
It's 100% a Christian genocide. And the thing is you talk to Armenians. I mean, look, I wanted to really get into also I'm aware of our time. So I wanted to get back into, how it's impacting regionally, but more or less, yes, it's a Christian genocide and it's been going on for a while. There was a major genocide at the turn of the 20th century
Yes.
where over 1.5 million Armenians were killed.
Which Western diplomats and politicians still, a century later, have problems even admitting.
Correct. 100%. And you know what? Many of these Armenians came to Lebanon, and when they came to Lebanon, they became doctors, lawyers, teachers. They never created any problems. They integrated into our society, and you'll find that in Beirut we have a lot of sections that are Armenian, and they contribute to our society. When the war started in 1975 in Lebanon, the civil war that went on to 1990, you find that the Armenians were always playing that positive role. But you look at the Palestinians that came in after being kicked out of, say, Jordan, after the Black September events, and they came in and set up camp. All they were is trouble. In fact, they were part of the Lebanese civil war problem. They were the same ones that, are part of the same problems right now with between Hamas and Israel. They're the ones that voted in Hamas. They were a problem in 1991 when Kuwait kicked out 200,000 Palestinians because they sided with Saddam Hussein. They are the ones that are where the Arab world does not want any part of Palestinians flowing in. And are there innocent Palestinians? I say absolutely. Do they deserve
Hang on,
attention?
let's
Yep,
tackle this head on. Because
let's do
again,
it.
this is the, oh my gosh, the innocents are being targeted.
Right.
Well, first things first, there is no moral equivalence between what the IDF is doing in Gaza and what Hamas did. The IDF doesn't bake babies in ovens, rape
Correct.
women, cut their breasts off, cut the babies out of their womb. So let's just stop with the moral equivalency thing. And then secondly, it's impolitic to say this, but it's also true. Every piece of polling data from Gaza, every piece in the last 7 weeks shows that 70% of the population agrees on October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So don't lecture me about innocents being killed. You have a permissive environment. It's like the Third Reich, okay? Not everybody was a member of the SS. But if you didn't do something about it, if you didn't try and at least leave the country, you create a permissive environment. It's like the Soviet Union. I used to lecture on the Cold War and on how we won, NSC 68. And I asked people, of the, 300 million people in the Soviet Union and allied nations, how many people do you think actually read Das Kapital? How many people actually read Karl Marx's works and knew, the Marxist dialectic, the stages of socialism? I'd say probably less than 1%. Does that make them innocent? No. If they didn't do what my father did, which is stop and stand up to the oppression, you are part of a permissive environment. We don't believe in collective guilt. But if you say, if 70% of a population says, yeah, going to a pop concert and raping and then slaughtering women is some kind of quote unquote resistance, well, then you're not part of civilization. And I mean, that was the message of this book. And I was really hoping that Defeating Jihad would be, ancient history. I've got a national daily radio show. I've got my TV show. And I thought I could put that behind me. This is more relevant than ever. Why? Because this is a civilizational conflict. It's as the jihadis say. Their chant is very clear. First, we come for the Saturday people, the Jews. Then we come for the Sunday people, the Christians. If you are quiet when innocents are being slaughtered, you have moral turpitude. You have no moral compass. So this is look, the testimony of these poor students at Harvard, at Berkeley, at UPenn yesterday in front of Congress, where they're saying this brave man Jacobi said, I don't want to hide my religious identity in America in 2020. Why should I? If you haven't seen the video of the Israeli ambassador to the UN in the session,
Very powerful.
3 weeks ago, where he takes out a yellow star with the word Jude, the German for Jew, and he places it on his suit and he hands it out to his delegation. This is in America. How is this happening? So Look, I have confidence. Look, we've already won. Thanks to our Lord and Savior, we've already won.
Amen.
But we have to understand that this is a civilizational conflict, and there's a reason why our civilization, the greatest civilization which the world has ever seen, the only civilization that is based upon the concept of what? Our rights are derived from God because we are made in his image. And there is a reason that our civilization is formally called the Judeo-Christian civilization. And we have to wake up to the fact of what is happening to Christians in India, in Armenia, in
Lebanon and Syria.
Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. I mean, just look at what has happened to the population, just the size, the shrinkage, the catastrophic shrinkage of the Christian civilization. And again, a little bit of history helps here. That whole region of the world, North Africa, the Middle East, what was it originally? It was Christian.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Muhammad comes along, if he ever really existed. Islam comes along centuries later and displaces Christians, persecutes Christians, slaughters Christians. The great church fathers were from North Africa and the Middle East. Christianity's bed isn't really Jerusalem because it was under occupation. The Christian fathers built the church in Antioch, in Anatolia, across Turkey, North Africa, Ethiopia. Can guys get a little bit of historic perspective on where our civilization's heart really is and who's trying to rip that heart out?
Yeah, they've been trying. Yeah, this has been going on for a long time. Let me add to what you said as well. And during the civil war in Lebanon, the same Palestinian leadership under Arafat at the time was responsible for the Damour massacre, which slaughtered 586 Christians, did the same thing they did on October 7th, and pushed 15,000 Christians out of their region. They did the same thing in Tel Zata. They did the same thing across Beirut. And yesterday, I was doing a little bit of research. It's interesting to me how when you do research and you start looking at various websites that look into, say, the Lebanese civil war the PLO has done, they are changing the narrative now, even online. So the information that you receive is completely false. I lived it. I know Brigitte Gabriel lived it. We saw it with our own two eyes. I came to the States in '84. I lived through 9.5 years of the Civil War. But the Palestinians were responsible for all these slaughters. They are responsible for these massacres. They did the same thing in 71 in Jordan, but the king of Jordan kicked them out. So everywhere they go, but the Lebanese civil war is essentially more or less in line with, their narrative and their approach to everything. They've never added to the growth of a population or in support of. They've always brought war and chaos.
But I don't want to undermine your argument here, but let's be even more brutally honest. It's not just about killing Christians. It's about killing anybody. There is no respect. Look at Hama. All this, oh my gosh, Gazans are being killed by Israelis. Well, Arabs kill each other with such abandon. I mean, Hama was surrounded by Assad's father. It was an Arab city. And what happened to Hama? 100,000 people just shelled into oblivion. Oblivion.
He also in major parts of Hama, he basically bulldozed the land and then literally threw salt on it so nothing would grow back.
Right. So it's just, you have to understand, it's a civilizational combat.
Yeah.
It's Chris, number one is the apostate. You've got to kill the Muslim who leaves Islam. Number one, you've got to kill the Hirsi Alis, for example, the Ayan Hirsi Alis. And number two, it's the Jews. Number three, it's the Christians. But it's one target set. It's one target set. And if an Arab gets in the way, who cares? They're not humans anyway. If I decide they're not humans, this is what you will not be told unless it's people like you who've lived it, or it's people like me who read what they say. I mean, all of this stuff, I'm getting, mild PTSD because the stuff people are telling me about the body cams and everything else, that was what my job was. Before I entered the White House, my job was to watch and read everything the jihadis published. I watched the video of Daniel Pearl being beheaded, not the one that's edited, not the stuff with blurred images, the whole thing, so I could understand who these people are. When you watch somebody sever another person's head off slowly with a small knife, then you start to understand. When you watch the full video of the Arab fighter pilot being burnt alive in a cage, the full version with nothing blurred, then you understand, guys, this is Armageddon. This is end times kind of stuff, and everyone needs to wake up.
So, so true, Seb. So, so true. Thank you for being so brutally honest. This is really important. I'm consciously aware of time because I know you have to go to your next event, but I wanna leave with this is the reason why we do what we do from a humanitarian standpoint is, in the middle of all this chaos, and if we don't solve these issues, these core geopolitical problems, what we have is massive refugee flows. And in the middle of this refugee flows, there's also another issue that pops up is these criminal networks, including or working or colluding with some of these jihadi networks, are involved in everything from sex slavery, organ harvesting, I mean, you name it, ritual killings, whatever it is, it's taking place. And this is where we try to get involved in helping communities, instead of being pushed out, hold their ground and be able to sustain themselves until something positive happens. Unfortunately, right now we are at a very poor period in time with our geopolitics, and I see these problems exacerbated more and more over time, unfortunately, until hopefully elections are changed
Yeah.
in this coming year. So I just wanted to leave on that note. I don't know if you have any last minute thoughts before you go, but
Well, first things first. If you want more detail, this is just 40 minutes just scratching the surface.
right.
The first book is Defeating Jihad. The third book is The War for America's Soul. The website, if you want more information, is sebgorka.com. That's SEBGORKA, sebgorka.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms. But let me just leave you with this quote. And first, anybody who's watched this, and even if a little bit rubs off on you, and if you care for your fellow man, it's the most beautiful thing you can do, is to support Rudy, support Terry, support the Blessings Project. It is perhaps one of the most beautiful things you can do in the Christmas season and any time of year. But
Thank you.
your point about refugees, 5 years ago, so pre-COVID, I know it sounds like a crazy idea, I took my family to the Middle East for Christmas. And before we went to Israel, we went to Jordan because I trained a lot of their military, and I wanted to show my family Jordan. And my wife had this amazing idea because she'd been working on the Syrian refugee issues. And we went to the biggest refugee camp in the Middle East, Zatari. And we were taken around Zatari by the chief of police. It's a city. I mean, it's monumental. It's got a shopping mall. It's got a movie theater. It's just huge. And this Jordanian police officer in the interview said the following: if the West really wants to help, you need to solve the problem where it's happening. You don't ship millions of people to other nations. You don't put them on boats. You don't give them to coyotes to be exploited and raped. The best thing you can do for local populations, whether they're Syrian or whether they're Christian or whether they're Zoroastrian, is to help them in situ.
Yeah.
To hear that from a Muslim,
it's fantastic.
in Jordan, that underscores and underlines everything that you do, Rudy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Seb, thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for what you do, for what you stand for. Hopefully we'll have you again.
Let's do this again. I feel really frustrated. You put a lot of work into this. I know you've got, so many people behind the scenes. 40 minutes is not enough. So let's do this again, Rudy.
We will do this again. Thank you so much. God bless and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Our love to your family.
Likewise. God bless.
God bless, brother. Thank you.